Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's 12:01, so I can say that. It's afternoon. Thank you for coming to hear me here at the Friday Forum. I'm excited to tell you about what we're doing under the title of Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. We affectionately refer to it as CEDS. I know that sounds somewhat medical, but what can I say? We're going to have to rebrand it at some point. But CEDS is the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy for the region. My name is Marty Vanags. I'm the Vice President for Regional Economic Development at the Chamber, and my other title, Executive Director of the Indy Partnership. The Indy Partnership is an organization that was merged with the Chamber in 2012 and is part of the Economic Development Group within the Chamber that's doing all things from an economic development standpoint. So we work in a 9-county region, and our job is to promote the economic or the Indy region to the outside world. And so we're concentrating on life sciences, information technology, distribution, logistics, and advanced manufacturing. Those are the industries and sectors that we concentrate on when we're marketing to the outside world. So whether it's a site location consultant who specializes in one of these areas, or if it's a company that is growing in these areas, we're going to be talking to them at some point, hopefully throughout the year, trying to convince them that the Indy region is the place for them to locate. So people often ask me, what is the region? What is the Indy region? And it really depends on why you ask or what the purpose of the question might be. But for economic development purposes and for marketing the Indy region, we concentrate on 9 counties, as you can see up on the screen. And those 9 counties are typically what we refer to as the Indy region. Sometimes they can include counties just outside that 9-county ring or 8-county ring, but these are the areas that we call. I had to look at a slide ahead to see where I'm at. So when I got here, everyone kept referring to the counties as the donut counties, and I just had a hard time with that. I don't know why, because when I think about a donut, which I really like, the donuts have a hole in the middle usually, and a donut without a hole in the middle is a Danish. And so I'm trying to train everybody to call them the Danish counties, not the donut counties, because Indianapolis is the creamy filling in the middle. All right, so just a little fun there. Hope you like that. So what I'm going to tell you today is give you an overview and a sense of who we are compared to some other communities in the region, and then tell you how we're going to use that information to move ourselves forward. And so when you look at the Indy region and we look at who we compare ourselves to from a variety of standpoints, and particularly when it comes to competing for projects in those sectors that I've described, these are the cities that we usually come up against. Chicago, Cincinnati, you can see the list. These are what we would call our MidWestern peer metros. And then the other ones on the right-hand side of the slide are what we call the pace-setter metros, or metros that, for a lot of reasons and a lot of statistics and a lot of ways, you can say are really rocking it. They're really doing a really good job in a variety of areas. These are the cities that you'll often hear about when you hear about places that are growing. When you look at top 10 lists, top 20 lists, top 100 lists, these cities generally do better than other cities, particularly ones on the left-hand side. And so I'm going to show you some statistics, based on a study that was done in 2011 by the Indy Chamber. A consultant came in to do some pre-work prior to the merger, and then we updated those numbers to show you where we're at today. So first, let's look at the MSA comparisons in terms of population and earnings. The Indy MSA, which includes some of those 9 counties, in 2000 to 2012 grew 16%, had a college attainment of 30%, employment growth of 5.7%, average earnings of 45, and per capita income of 39. If you compare that to our Midwest peers, we do better or about the same in all areas except when it comes to the per capita income in average earnings, which are lower than they have been, or ours are lower than our peers. And then when you look at the pay setters, you can see that we're significantly different in most areas, particularly when it comes to the population growth, almost double our percentage growth rate. When you and there's just some numbers to take a look at. When you let's look at each of those a little bit more closely. So on population growth, Indianapolis among its peers was right up there in the top 3. Oklahoma City, Kansas City also grew in that time period significantly. The Midwest average was 9.3%, and some of our Midwestern peers are lower and or declining, particularly Pittsburgh and Cleveland. But when it comes again to the pace setters, huge increases in Raleigh, Austin, Charlotte, the South and Southeast. The average was 32% among those, but you can see that we were down there at 16% growth if we compare ourselves to the pace setters. In terms of education, college graduates, MSA and above, again, Midwestern peers, Kansas City, Chicago, Columbus did a little better than us, or a little better than us in those numbers in 2011. The Midwest average, were just below that. As opposed to our pace setters, again, Raleigh is right up there, Austin, Denver, with those higher numbers. Job growth, again, 5.7%, not a bad number compared to Kansas City, Oklahoma City, where numbers were even higher. But then you look at the pace setters, their average, I mean, we were half of their average, so they were at 11.4%, with Austin and Raleigh, again, at the very top. Average earnings, Indianapolis at 45, Midwest average of 47, pace setters, again, their average is 50. We don't look too bad here, but compared to all the other pace setters, we're last. Average earnings, this is where it starts getting kind of ugly. Among Midwestern peers, we're at the very bottom in average earnings. And obviously that would place us at the very bottom of the pace setters as well. The Midwest average change in 2002 to 2012 was 4%, and we were negative 1.7%. The per capita personal income, again, the picture isn't as good. Midwest average 42, we're below that. Same with the pace setter average, we're below that, obviously. And Denver and Nashville, again, near the top. And then personal income per capita growth, 2.7% average, we're down negative 4% in that same time period. So again, these numbers aren't very good, and it says something a little bit about the type of jobs that have been created, even though we've had a lot of jobs created. So that is just raw statistics taken from U.S. Labor Bureau and other publicly available sites. But a lot of times it's good to look at other sources of data about who you are as a community and what you're doing. And so one of the ones that I really like is called Milken Institute, Best Performing Cities. And they rank metropolitan areas on how well they're creating, sustaining jobs and economic growth. And so the top 5 large cities in their website, and I've got the website at the end of this presentation, you can see it, are again, Austin, Texas, Provo, Orem, Utah, San Francisco, San Jose, and Salt Lake City. Their picture's a little bit different in that you don't see in the top 5 too many cities from the southeast. You do see Texas and you see the west, and that horrible state of California where nobody wants to do business or do anything, not according to this. So it just depends. So here are the top 10 large cities, and the only problem I have with Milken is how they define large cities. And I looked on their site, I really didn't see the definition, because as you can see, number 10, somehow Greeley, Colorado is now a large city. I'm not sure how that happened, but they're number 10. We are number 33, moving up from 51 in 2012. And so, again, not a bad, it's a mediocre performance if you ask me. So I took our Midwestern peer cities from that previous study that we did, and showed where we stood based on Milken numbers. And again, we are, when you compare, Oklahoma City seems to be doing a lot of interesting things. Pittsburgh came out a little bit higher than us, and Indianapolis came in at 33 and everyone else following. What's interesting to note here is our rank change in those first 4 or 5, except for Louisville. We moved up more than anybody from 18 slots to 33. And then on the edge, on the right-hand edge, I put the population so people can kind of see how we compared. In Cleveland, or actually Cincinnati dropped quite a bit, so everyone else moved up the list. Among the pace setters, here's where we stand among the pace setters. Austin, Raleigh, Nashville, same kind of chorus I've been talking before, all ranking fairly high. Some of them moving up quite significantly, particularly Nashville and Charlotte from their 2012 rank. Raleigh dropped 10 points. I'm not sure what happened there. And then the last thing I wanted to look at is, okay, who's right above us, who's right below us on the Milken Scale? Again, Holland, Grand Haven, all of a sudden is a large city. I'm not sure how that happened. I don't even know what their metro population, does anybody know? Off the top of their head, right? Everybody has that memorized. White Plains is below us, so you can see where we rank and where we stand among some of these other communities. So their index is made up of certain components, and these are the components that they use: 5-year job growth, 1-year job growth, and so forth and so on. And you can see where we ranked in some of the previous years on some of those rankings. So just on the 5-year job growth, we were kind of flat for a long time, and then all of a sudden from 2012 to 2013 we took a jump up to the 51st spot. Same with the 1-year job growth, which would make sense. The 5-year salary growth, again, going up a little bit. So the way we look and the way we come out under the Milken Index looks a little better than if you're just looking at the raw statistics. The last couple ones on here, the HighTech GDP LQ, and is location quotient, and this next slide describes what that is. So it's the location quotient is a measure of how you compare from a locational standpoint of cluster industries compared to other cities. So a metro with an LQ of 1 or higher is said to be more concentrated in that area. And so often when we put together cluster studies of industry, we look to the LQ quotient to determine which of those industries we have a high concentration in. In this case, they're looking at high tech, how they defined it, whether it's NAICS codes or other things, I'm not sure. But the highest, of course, would be Silicon Valley, San Jose, California, with an LQ of 3.58, which is pretty significant. The lowest is Laredo, Texas. And then they looked at the number of highly concentrated high-tech industries in San Diego, several different clusters of high-tech industries, 18, and again, the lowest was Laredo, Texas, along with Lakeland, Florida. So if you look back here, the high-tech GDP, well, high-tech GDP growth, and you can see that we went from 102 in 2008 up to 43 in 2013, which tells us something about our high-tech growth area. And then, and then the high-tech GDP LQs over 1, we're at 5, and so that's pretty significant as well, even though it's not 18 like San Diego. So that leads us to why a SEDS, why a comprehensive economic development strategy for our Danish counties in Indianapolis. We are a large metropolitan region, but when you look at us compared to other metropolitan regions, we're not as spread out as one might think. And the reason really is Unigov. In the 70s when that was created, many of the problems that other large regions have suffered from a sprawl standpoint in capturing sales tax and tax revenue, we obliterated that by creating Unigov. We're now only seeing some of those issues with the suburbs that have gone beyond Marion County. And so one of the things that is important as a region is to come together and have a regional economic development plan. And there are a number of reasons for that. So collaboration is so important for one reason, and when it comes from an attraction standpoint, when my unit is out there talking to people from the outside world, they are interested in something called the Indianapolis region. They don't know, in many cases, that the city of Indianapolis stops and starts at the Marion County line. They don't know where Carmel starts and ends. They don't know if Plainfield out by the airport is part of Indianapolis or not. But they do know it's in the region, and they do know that we're, as a region, interconnected through our transportation, through our labor force, through our retail practices. It's all interconnected. So to them, the Indianapolis region is one place. And so the slogan goes, sell regionally, or market regionally, sell locally. And so our job, just in a real quick explanation, when we market, we make people aware of the Indy region. Site location consultants will contact us because we told them, contact us if you need help. They'll send us a request for information or proposal, RFP, and we'll put together a package of data. And that data often includes labor force information, top companies, all kinds of stuff. And then the one thing they always ask for, not always, but most of the time, is sites and buildings. So they'll say, we need 500,000 square feet. It's got to be this size, tall ceilings. It's got to be near an interstate, water, electricity, all those kind of physical things that are important about a building. And we'll reach out to our local economic development organizations, the cities, and others and say, okay, if you guys got this building this size for this company, they'll send us that information. So we'll package that all together and send it to them. So sometimes we hear from them right away. Sometimes we hear from them months later, many months later, maybe years later. And they'll say, all right, we've shortened our list. We're now interested in the Indianapolis region. We're going to schedule a visit here in a couple weeks. We'd like a tour. We'd like to interview like companies that have similar type of workforces. We'd like to meet the mayor or mayors. We'd like to talk to the state. We'd like to talk to, whoever they want to talk to. We're going to make that happen. And so they'll come in. We'll arrange all those meetings. We'll arrange the itinerary. We'll help them around. We'll take them from one place to the next. Sometimes we'll buy them dinner. Sometimes if the Pacers are in town, we'll take them to a basketball game, whatever makes their life easy. And we roll out the red carpet. I call that the red carpet service. And so once they say, all right, it's down to Indianapolis and Columbus, we want to talk to the people that own the building in Marion County, in northwest Marion County, and Intech, and then we also want to look at a building in Plainfield. So now we got two counties involved, Marion County, in the city of Indianapolis, and Plainfield and Hendricks County. So at that point, we hand them off, if they want us to, which they usually do, to those people and say, tell them about your incentives, tell them about what you're willing to do, if there's a road improvement that needs to be done, whatever it is they're asking for, provide a incentive sheet, a term sheet, whatever you want to call it, to these folks so they can make their decision. And once that happens, sometimes we wait. Sometimes, again, the decision comes quickly. Sometimes it comes slowly. Sometimes it doesn't come at all. And sometimes they say, thanks, but we picked Columbus. And we say why, and very rarely will they tell us because their client doesn't want you to know, and they just want to move on. So it's an odd thing. It's not like any other sale. We're like, hey, customer, what did we do wrong? How could we have done better next time? Sometimes we just don't know. And so, anyway, that whole process has obviously regional implications and cooperation and collaborative issues involved. And so it's really important that as an economic development organization owned by the Chamber of Commerce, that we are sensitive to the regional issues, regional wants and needs and character and personality of all the communities in the 9-county region. And so the SEDS develops this economic roadmap for our entire region. So a guide or the goal in SEDS is to create regional goals and objectives. They can be project-oriented, which has been traditionally the SEDS route, or it can be a regional plan of action. In other words, how much time will we spend on attraction? How much time will we spend on business retention and expansion? In other words, working with local businesses to help them grow and expand. How much time are we going to spend on entrepreneurship and small business development? Now, how much money do we want to put towards this to make all this happen? How much are you all going to contribute to make this happen? So that's part of what's going to happen. And since I put this slideshow together, and I should say since, within about 30 days, we're going to learn what new SEDS requirements are being put into the federal rules. Let me back up a little bit. What you may or may not know is Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, or SEDS, is a name that was coined by the Economic Development Administration, EDA, which is a subunit of the U.S. Department of Commerce, USCOM, right? So now you got the acronyms. So the EDA for years has provided communities or economic development districts, EDDs, created through a SEDS process, money to do infrastructure improvements for economic development projects. And so to be eligible for those projects, you have to create this district and you have to go through the process. And so to some degree, we're dictated to by EDA as to what we have to have in our plan. And for years it's been, you got to have projects, this infrastructure project, that infrastructure project. They're about to change the rules so that it's less project oriented and more process oriented. In other words, how are you going to do it? Why are you going to do it? What's the rationale? Which I am more happy to do than to worry about projects, because then you start doling it out, like who's going to get what, when, and where, and that type of thing. So some requirements that says in the EDA requires is analysis of economic development problems and opportunities, basically a SWOT analysis. Goals and objectives, defining regional expectations. What do we want to do? What do we want to accomplish? I'm going a little long. Community and private sector participation has to be key. So we have a steering committee made up of about 50 people with public and private sector individuals, nonprofit, government officials. Strategic projects, programs, and activities, what I just described, and plan of action, how are we going to do it? And then finally, most importantly, performance measures. How are we going to measure whether or not we're successful? Now, traditionally, it's always been jobs and capital investment, but there are other ways to measure economic development activity and growth. We've hired a consultant to help us because this is just a big project that takes much more time and effort than a couple people out of our office can manage. And that company's called Market Street Services out of Atlanta, Georgia. Pretty well-known economic development consultant in my world. And they come in and we've started a process. On October 6th, we had a kickoff meeting with our steering committee, talked about what we're doing, why we're doing it, what the expectations are, what we want them to do. And then this is the process and timeline in a nutshell on one page. November 12th, a couple weeks from now, they're going to come back and give us a competitive assessment. We chose 3 cities, Denver, Nashville, and Columbus, because we wanted to compare ourselves, much like I just showed you, but they're going to do an even deeper dive into that and more current dive into how we compare, but they couldn't do 8, 9 cities, so we picked these 3. Denver because, well, Columbus because they're our competitors, Nashville because they're also compete, not so much, but if you, if you really look at it, they're very similar to us, even though they're what might be called Mid-South city. And then Denver, because they are one of those aspirational type cities or pace-setter cities that there's many things there that we like, or that like transportation that is really good. It has nothing to do with that other thing they're famous for recently. So they're gonna do a deep dive on that. And then January, they're gonna look at our sectors, the ones I described earlier, and validate those target sectors. Are they really still, are there LQs above 1? Are they higher? Are there other potential new sectors that we ought to be addressing or looking at into the future, whether it's attraction and or growing here locally? In February, they're going to take all that information that they put together and put together a draft economic development strategy for us and the steering. And all these are steering committee meetings that you see here. March, we'll look at a final economic development strategy. And then the last two meetings are taking that strategy and developing an implementation plan. How are we going to do it? Who's going to do what? So forth and so on. So that's me. That's my phone number. That's my email. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions at this point, or happy to have a discussion after this session is over. Anybody? All right. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, wait, I'll ask it.
Okay. Well, ask it, and then I'll repeat it, and then we'll have something for the video.
You mentioned Uniga as being something that makes us very unusual and helped in the past by expanding sort of Indy boundaries, but is that now seen as more of a benefit or in any way hindering us, or is it neither?
The Uniga?
The Uniga.
Well, at this point, there's a lot of discussion about what is called a commuter tax or equality, and so the question is, I think initially it was smart. Hey, you had the inner community, and what the city did was by turning it into one square block city, they captured that growth and the taxes that came with it so they could pay for those services. But now we're at a point where that growth is going outside that ring. And in Indiana, the tax situation is you pay your taxes in the community you live, not where you work. And so our research, and it's not research within the chamber, tells us that we're one of the few states like that. And so 220,000 people on a daily basis drive into Marion County from the outside counties and essentially use the roads, the services. And I think that what's fair is probably a very, very small sharing of the existing tax, or just a slight increase that I think very few people would have a problem with. But if you live in Fishers and you drive into the city and you get in a car accident, or even you're just driving in the city or using the services of the city, and those have to be paid for. So anyway, so I think those are the kind of things that people are looking at to determine whether or not we can fund government and the services that we all require and want, including public safety, which is the largest expenditure. But I think it was good, and it's still probably good. It's just a matter of how we live today is a little different than the past. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and attention. I'm here if you have any questions.